So who's the richest person to have ever lived? I mean, is it some tech billionaire we see in the news today? An ancient king just dripping in gold? Or maybe a dictator who had an entire country in the palm of his hand? Well, the answer, it's not as simple as you'd think. And to find it, we've got to start with today's benchmark for truly insane wealth.
And that benchmark, our starting point, is Elon Musk. Now, his net worth is always changing, but it's floating around an almost unbelievable $400 billion, a number so huge it's honestly hard to wrap your head around.
To give you an idea of just how crazy that is, if you started working way back when the first humans were figuring things out, you still wouldn't be done. It would take you 8 million years. That is 30 times longer than our species, Homo sapiens, has even been on the planet.
So yeah, that number is staggering. But does it make him the richest person in all of history? You see, to even start to answer that, we have to look past the dollar signs for a second and ask a much bigger question. Because to figure this out, you can't just compare bank accounts across hundreds or thousands of years. We first have to agree on what wealth really is. And believe me, it's about way more than just cash.
See, true wealth has always been about one thing: control. It's not just money. It's influence over entire economies. It's ownership of massive amounts of land. It's absolute, undeniable political power. And when you define wealth that way, oh boy, our list of contenders gets a whole lot more interesting. First up, let's look at a type of wealth that's pretty hard to imagine today. Just total, absolute power, where how much money you have in your pocket is completely, totally irrelevant. Think about this contrast for a second. On one side, you've got someone like Pablo Escobar. He had so much physical cash, we're talking $80 billion, that he spent $1,000 a week just on rubber bands to hold it all together. And then, on the other side, you have Joseph Stalin. On paper, the guy was broke. In reality, he controlled the entire Soviet economy, worth about $10 trillion.
And Stalin's story really tells you everything you need to know about his kind of wealth. He didn't care about money. His paychecks literally just piled up on his desk. He never even cashed them. His power was so total that when he had a fatal stroke, his own guards were too terrified to get a doctor for 12 hours. They were more afraid of waking him up than of letting him die. That right there, that's a kind of control money just can't buy.
And speaking of absolute control, let's talk about Genghis Khan. I mean, if you're measuring wealth by the sheer amount of land you control, he just blows everyone else out of the water. His Mongol Empire covered nearly 20% of the Earth's surface. That gives him a theoretical net worth of $130 trillion.
And yet, just like Stalin, Genghis Khan had basically no personal stuff. He ate the same food, wore the same clothes as his soldiers. Any loot they got from conquests, he just gave it away to his troops to make sure they stayed loyal. His wealth wasn't locked in a vault. It was in the command of the most terrifying army on the planet. But, not all rulers saw wealth as this abstract thing. For some, it was way more tangible. It was tied directly to the gold, to the resources of the empires they ruled. And there is no better example of this, maybe in all of human history, than Mansa Musa, the king of the Mali Empire back in the 14th century. Historians have called him the original flexor, and for a very, very good reason. Okay, so on his pilgrimage to Mecca, he didn't exactly pack light. He brought a caravan of 60,000 people with him, and hundreds of animals, all of them, loaded down with thousands of pounds of pure gold. And then he just started handing it out to people. He gave away so much gold that he single-handedly caused massive inflation and totally crashed the economies of the cities he visited. He actually had to borrow gold back at high interest just to fix the mess he made. His wealth was estimated at over $400 billion. And if we go even further back, you've got Augustus Caesar. After he defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra, he didn't just conquer Egypt, he basically took it as his own personal property. At his peak, he controlled about 20% of the entire Roman economy. That gives him an estimated net worth of around $5 trillion in today's money. All right, let's jump forward in time. The age of emperors and kings starts to fade, and the age of capitalism begins. And with it, a new kind of tycoon emerged, forging empires not of land, but of industry. And the undisputed king of this era was John D. Rockefeller. By the 1880s, his company Standard Oil controlled 90% of America's oil. To put his wealth into perspective, at his peak, his personal fortune was equal to a full 2% of the entire U.S. economy. And here is the absolute best part of his story.
The government thought he was way too powerful, so the Supreme Court broke Standard Oil up into 34 smaller companies. You'd think that would ruin him, right? Nope. He owned stock in all 34 of those new companies, and their combined value shot through the roof, making him the world's first ever billionaire, and way richer than he was before they broke up his company.
Okay, so we've met the conquerors, the kings, and the capitalists. We've seen wealth as pure power, as literal gold, and as a huge chunk of an economy. So, after all that, who actually comes out on top?
Well, if you just look at the raw numbers, Genghis Khan is the winner with a mind-blowing 130 trillion. But remember, that was all theoretical, based on land he never really owned. The more realistic contenders are guys like Rockefeller and Mansa Musa, both sitting in that $400 to $600 billion range.
So let's compare Rockefeller directly to our modern guy, Elon Musk. Like we said, Rockefeller controlled 2% of the US economy in his day. Elon, today, controls about 1.4%. So, case closed, right? Rockefeller had a bigger slice of the pie?
Well, not so fast, because having a bigger slice doesn't actually mean you have more pie if the pie itself has gotten unimaginably bigger.
I mean, just look at the numbers here. The US economy today is 22 times larger than it was back in 1913. So even though Rockefeller had a bigger percentage, it was a percentage of a much, much smaller economy. Elon's smaller slice comes from a pie that is absolutely massive by comparison. And that right there leads us to our final answer. Elon Musk is the richest person in history. Not because he had more absolute power than a dictator, not because he had more gold than an ancient king. It's because he is the biggest fish in the biggest economic pond the world has ever seen. His wealth is personal, it's verifiable, and it exists inside a global economy that is more prosperous than at any other point in human history. So here's the final thought to leave you with. The story of wealth isn't just about one person at the top. It's about the size of the whole pond. And what history shows us is that as that pond keeps growing, it's not just the biggest fish that benefits. The real question isn't just who's going to be the next richest person, it's how much richer will we all become.